Okay, hello again, everybody. Thank you again for joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you might be in the world. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar this morning. So this webinar is focused specifically on how to survive and thrive at UC San Diego. We have a great panel of current graduate students here this morning, different support staff from UC San Diego as well to help answer your questions. So we're really glad you're here and excited to get started. Do know that the session is being recorded. So all of our pre-arrival webinars for our newly admitted international students are available at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. So if you miss any information or you want to go back and review it, do know that it is being recorded, the entire presentation. We also are leaving time for questions at the end of this presentation. We want to make sure this is as interactive as possible. So you'll see on your Zoom control panel, there is a Q&A box there that you can use. We are asking that you keep your questions to the end of the presentation because we are covering a lot of information today. But if you have any questions, go ahead and just type it into the question box there. We will be taking questions and asking them out loud just so that the whole group benefits from the answer. We won't use any identifying information, so don't worry about that. But if just do know that we will be asking those out loud so everyone can benefit. Okay, so we're going to go ahead with just some quick checklist reminders before we get started. As I mentioned before, we are joined by various different staff and students from UC San Diego. I'm joined by my colleagues Shauna Slebiota and Sally Binney from the Graduate Division. I myself am Gabi Hoffman from the International Students and Programs Office. You might recognize my voice from some of the previous webinars we've hosted. But we're going to be going over some important reminders for you as you get started as a new international graduate student. So the first page we want to have you familiar with as an international student is our inewstudent.ucsd.edu page. This is a great start for our international students as it goes through all of your first steps in applying for your visa documents and completing various different steps like your immunization requirements and so forth. It outlines everything. Once you go to that site, you'll see there's a population-specific button there for master's, PhD students. And that will take you to the International Graduate Student site where it'll walk you through the various different steps you need to go through to get started here. So if you haven't visited this page already, please go ahead and do that as soon as possible, and it'll help you get through everything you need before you begin your journey here at UCSD. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Sally to go over some reminders from the Graduate Division, graduate admissions.
Thank you, Gabi. I just wanted to remind everybody to please continue to log into your portal at gradapply.ucsd.edu and make sure, most students, when we admit you provisionally. And what that means is that the unofficial transcripts that you use to be reviewed for admissions, we need final versions of those transcripts, and it'll be listed on your student portal. And it would be a good time to take now to start submitting those documents. We're receiving them daily. We're still going into the office and processing transcripts. A lot of schools can send these as e-transcripts, but just stay on top of that because you want to make sure that you switch from provisionally admitted to final admit. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are, again, in the office 2 days a week, but working remotely, and we can answer questions all the time. We can be reached at gradadmissions@ucsd.edu. So again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And this is what your student portal is going to look like, and it'll show your forms, and you'll see pending admissions documents. And this is where you will find out exactly what the admissions office requires of you in order to be finalized from an admissions perspective. Again, if you have any questions about what is listed here, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And a lot of these documents can be sent as e-documents. I know a lot of institutions are closed right now, but you can still be working on this and trying to get yourself finalized during these times of COVID. Shauna, did you want to talk about the admitted students section of the student portal?
Yes, thank you, Sally. So my name is Shauna Slebiota. I work in the graduate division, and part of my job is coordinating orientation activities for new graduate students on behalf of graduate division. Of course, in conjunction with a grad life intern who is Celine, and you will hear from her later. I would just like to call your attention when you are in the application portal. In the bottom corner, you will see the admitted student section, and there's instructions here on items that you need to take care of as a new graduate student, both before you arrive and as you're preparing for your arrival at UC San Diego. So I just want to encourage you to check out our website and check out the admitted student section to see what items you still need to complete.
Great, thank you, Sally and Shauna. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful international graduate students to begin their presentation today for all of you.
Hi everyone, my name is Celine. I'm a third year in the literature department, a PhD student, and I also work as the grad life intern. So I'm in the office with Shauna in grad division, and I work on everything related to graduate student life. And I would just like everyone here to introduce themselves. So Fiona, if you want to go on.
Hi, I'm Fiona. I'm a third year art history PhD student, and I'm from Belgium.
Hi, I'm Corentin. I'm a fourth year EC PhD student. I'm also from Belgium.
Hi everyone, my name is Sushil. I'm a second year PhD student in education studies.
All right, thank you everyone. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is kind of like the basics of what we're going to talk about. So I wanted to touch on what to do before you get here, and specifically the resources that you have. You of course can look at all the webinars that ISPO has put on, but I wanted to touch on some other things. And then the second thing that we wanted to talk about is finding your support network. It's really, really key that you find different ways, different people to support you on campus, colleagues, advisors, mentors, things like that. And then lastly, of course, asking for help. All right, so what can I do to prepare myself now? I did want to highlight the webinars and the resources available on the CAPS website. So all of those webinars, you can click on them. If you can even go to the CAPS website right now and watch the different resources available. I would highly recommend watching the ones on imposter syndrome. I know for me, I didn't know about imposter syndrome before I got into grad school. I didn't even have the vocabulary to be able to speak about it. So watching this really helped me be able to identify what it was and how to ask for help. Another thing that I highly recommend is the webinar on advising and how to discuss crucial topics with your advisor, how to pick out your advisor, and things like that. And I see that Shauna has linked the CAPS website. Thank you, Shauna, in the chat, so you can click on it now. Did anybody else want to add kind of like your advice on how to prepare? Okay, awesome. I think we can go to the next.
Yeah, something actually I would advise looking up a little bit what San Diego looks like just on a map and where you would want to live before. Because I remember when I arrived the first time, I accidentally booked an hotel that was downtown, which is not exactly close to campus, which made it difficult to find housing at first. So definitely look up the city and be familiar with the city before you arrive to San Diego.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Next, I want to talk about finding your support network. So in this slide, I wanted to focus on GSA, which is the Graduate Student Association. So GSA is made up of different representatives from across departments, and we all come together as a graduate student council to discuss various topics, vote on things. And personally, I've been a GSA rep for the literature department for 2 years now. And I know Viona can also talk about being a GSA rep, and Sushila is actually our current Vice President of EDI, so Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So I'll take it over to you guys if you want to share your experiences with GSA.
Okay, I'm a GSA rep for art history. It's really nice because you can get in touch with other people on campus because all the reps from all the different departments all meet together, so you get to meet them. And then they make these committees to organize things on campus, and then through those you get to meet more people, so it's a good way to kind of create a support network.
Sorry, I won't add too much information at this point. If there are questions about what GSA is and what it does, I'm happy to answer those later.
Okay, awesome. I just listed some different support groups on campus that are outside of GSA. So we have things like the Black Women's Collective that meets every other week, the Coming Out Group, the Gay Men's Forum that meets every Monday. We also recently launched the Parent Guardian Caregivers Forum. That's kind of a new group that we have, new support group. And all of these support groups are meeting online right now, but hopefully we can meet in person soon. All right, and I think that's it for our presentation, and we'd like to open it up to questions now.
Sushila, I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit. We had a slide here about the GSA. Maybe this is an opportunity to kind of go over a little bit more about the Graduate Student Association and what it does and how students can get involved a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. I was just hesitating because it was under a support network, and I wasn't sure. So GSA is every department, depending on the strength of the students in the department, gets a certain number of representatives. So most departments have somewhere between 3 and 4 representatives, and every other week, all of these representatives kind of meet to talk together about graduate student issues and the experience of graduate students on campus. And this is kind of the consulting body for the university for graduate students. So if the university is thinking about doing something with the graduate students, is thinking about initiatives, is thinking about solutions for graduate student issues, this is the body. The Graduate Student Association Council is the body that the university will kind of approach first to ask what we think about it. So in a way, for some people, it can function as a support network as well, because you do find a community of students who are interested in representing student concerns and representing student issues. But this also becomes a way for the reps to be that support network for their department. So you also become kind of the point of contact for students. If they have certain issues, if they have certain things that need attention from the university, then you become the point of contact. So for me personally, I got involved. My department, GSA reps were not necessarily very active last year, so I just didn't know about it. But I got this email about a diversity advisory council meeting, and it seemed interesting because that is what my research and my work is also on. It's around issues of equity and diversity. So I was hesitating because from the email it seemed like this formal big thing. And I was like, I am interested, but I don't know if I can just walk into a room of unknown people and say, hey, I'm also interested in these things. So I hesitated till about 15 minutes before the actual meeting. And I was like, should I go? Should I not go? Then I ended up going. It was in one of the lounges on campus. And there were about 7 or 8 people in the room, and there was some food, and they was just kind of chatting amongst each other. It seemed like a very easygoing place to be in. I think Viona may have been in that room when I first came in, and then that's it. I found that this was a group of very like-minded people. They were interested in the same things as I was, and there was definitely space for me to do things and get more involved, which is how I did. And of the several support networks I've found on campus, this happens to be one of those. Yeah.
Sushil, there are a couple of people asking specifically about the GSA funding. Can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I did not look at the questions box. Yes. So GSA funding as it relates to students directly, there is only one, and correct me if I'm wrong, Celine, there is only one kind of funding, which is the conference travel funding. So if you're presenting at a conference, if you've done some research and you've been selected to speak at a conference, you can apply for GSA funding. Sorry. And I think it goes up to $500 per student. And there's some limits on how many times a year you can access it. So it's a lottery system. There's no way GSA has the capacity or the ability to evaluate proposals for funding. So whoever has been selected to speak at a conference just applies for this funding, and we do a lottery system. In terms of your funding for your program, for your day-to-day expenses and those kinds of things, GSA funding is not what you're looking at. There are several other funding sources. So as a department, if you want to put together an event, if you're an association of students, you want to put together an event, then there are definitely some funds available for that. So typically we fund about $7 per student per event. So if you're putting together an event and you're expecting about 100 people to attend, you can get up to $700 from the GSA pot. I hope that answers the questions about GSA funding. Celine,
Yeah,
I see you're unmuted here.
I just wanted to add that Fiona and I helped organize and put together a conference for the Arts and Humanities graduate students. And we did apply for GSA funding, the funding that Sushil is talking about, to put on the event. So I highly recommend that, especially if you are in a department that maybe doesn't have a really big events budget and you want to put on some kind of conference or symposium or even a small get together and invite one speaker and have some food. So yeah, GSA has a big events budget for that sort of thing. And I also applied for GSA funding to upgrade our lounge in the literature department, because our lounge needed a new table so we can all sit and have food together. So yeah, GSA is good for buying furniture, buying stuff like that, event funding. And we can also talk a little bit about other kinds of funding, because I know there was a question about TA-ships and RA-ships. I can speak to TA-ships. So my PhD is funded through TA-ships. I was a TA for my first 2 years. And then this year I work in Grad Life, which is a GSR position. And if people have more questions, we can talk about that too.
So I was both research assistant and a TA. So it usually, at least in my department in ECA, it really depends on the funding of your professor and on if they are teaching this quarter or not, if you're a PhD student. The RA, so the research assistant, as you can guess from the name, is you're just getting paid to do research. And so it depends on the expectation of your professor, but you basically take it as a class, and then at the end of each quarter, the professor gives you a pass or no pass. I mean, usually you get a pass. It's like, I've never heard someone not passing their research assistantship. It's not like it's a class, but that's how you organize it. And then the TA, if you're a master student, it can become your main source of revenue. If you can get TA-ship, it's very hard to get them during your first quarter, usually, because professors like to have seen that you can do well at UCSD, so they usually ask for at least 1 quarter of you just having taken classes to show that you can, I mean, you are you're good enough to be able to teach those classes afterwards. And yeah, the pay, I think, for TA-ships and RAs are not that different. It kind of depends on the department and the number of hours. That's it. I mean, and yeah, when you're TAing, you usually have less time to do research. So yeah, that's also to take into account.
Going off of the funding piece a little bit in RAs and TAs, there is a question that says, if a student can TA more than 1 course in a quarter, or do both an RA and TA in the same quarter? Do any of you have experience about that you would like to talk about?
So I TA'd at a 75%. So usually when you TA, you're hired as a 50%, which is 20 hours a week. I did TA at a 75%, but my department had to approve it. So they can make exceptions, but again, it depends on your department. But as an international student, I think that that's different. I see Fiona shaking her head.
Yeah, for international students, you can only do 50%, but you can do 25% because sometimes they do have lower percentage teaching classes and work that you can do. So that's just something to keep in mind.
There is a question here I want to go back to. It's asking about fitness and sports organizations at UCSD and if there's a cost that's associated with that.
The gym is free, right? I think that's covered by GSA fees or something. I don't know, but the gym is free, so you just need your student ID to check in. And they have this cool yoga fitness pass that Celine and I both have, and it's pretty cheap and you can take a bunch of classes. They also have other sports, but I don't really know that much about those. I think there's like intramural stuff, but I don't know if someone else can talk about those.
Yeah, so for intramural, I did intramural dodgeball 1 quarter, and it is, you just have to create your own team. Well, depending on the sport, you need a certain number of people. You meet once to twice a week, and it's, I think, $5 for the quarter, so it's very cheap, and you can just participate in intramural sports that way. There's also some Facebook groups. I know there's like a soccer Facebook group that meet every Sunday, and so that's very easy if you like to play soccer to just join a group and they just play on the fields at UCSD.
The gym facilities are fantastic, and I don't know if they're free because we definitely pay for them, but depending on what department and what program you're a part of, those fees may be paid for you by the department, or you may be actually paying those out of your pocket. But you don't have a choice of not paying them, so you're paying it anyway, so you might as well use the facilities. I will highlight the recreation department runs a lot of classes, and those are not well publicized. A lot of my friends, even after 2 years, don't know that those classes happen. Although I don't know what these classes will look like starting fall 2020 because of social distancing and the situation right now. But if and when the situation gets back to normal, I'm guessing that those classes will start again. And they are reasonably priced. It's for a quarter, I learned swimming. And growing up in India, I grew up in a city, I never had an opportunity to learn swimming. And I've been doing swimming classes every quarter. And I pay like $50 for the whole quarter. So 10 classes, $50, it's not really that bad. I've been trying to play some volleyball. I've never touched a volleyball in my life. So I was paying about $30, $35 a quarter for 10 classes. And the thing is, I get an instructor, but I also get a beginner's level group to kind of play with. So I don't have to go into a group who's already kind of good with volleyball and struggle with them. So there is a bunch of opportunities with recreation, with sports, and especially opportunities for you to learn certain things that you've been wanting to learn and have not had the opportunity. So I would urge you all to explore those opportunities if and when we get back to normal life in the world, not just at UCSD.
I was just going to say, we have a question here that's come up asking about living on campus versus off campus. They want to know, so this person wants to know, is it better to live on campus or off campus for PhD students?
I've done both. I started off campus and then moved to campus and then moved back out of campus. So most PhD students get only 2 years of housing unless you get the Shores Fellowship, or I don't know exactly what, but there's something called Shores that allows you to take 5 years, I think, on campus. So I think I would recommend trying to start on campus if you can, because it's fairly inexpensive and it helps you getting situated with the city, finding a group of people you might want to live with, and I mean, the quality of the housing definitely varies a lot depending on where you live on campus, but some of them are pretty nice. And also gives you time to build a credit score, which is something that's fairly important if you want to get housing in the US. Is you want to get, I don't like saying this, you don't need to get a credit card, but it really helps to get housing if you have a credit score. It's something that a lot of landlords ask for. And usually it takes 3 to 6 months to build a score that is good enough to get housing off campus. And then, yeah, right now I'm living off campus with a few friends from my PhD program and other PhD program. And I mean, I like it. We're a bit further from campus, but the quality of the housing is also much better. We have a garden. So it's kind of a trade-off. You can live close to campus for cheaper if you live on campus and go to school and to work easily, but you sometimes feel a bit isolated. Whereas off campus, you can be closer to more activities or have a bigger house. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
I was typing some of the answers, so I wasn't listening to everything you said, Quentin, but one of the things I will say is just in terms of travel within the city, staying on campus, at least in the first year, is highly recommended for me. It just cuts down on all of that concern with traffic and finding buses and the expense of traveling. And once you've been around for a while, and if you figure that La Jolla is not meant for you, you would rather live somewhere else. And especially as a PhD student, you still have 4 or 5 years to go before you leave San Diego. So you have ample time left to kind of go and live somewhere else in the city.
Any other thoughts about housing? Or I do have a question here about going from a semester system to a quarter system, and if any of you have any thoughts on that or strategies or suggestions to help somebody in that situation.
So I was on a semester system before, and it does feel very fast to go on the quarter system. So I would say that, yeah, just don't take classes lightly. They build up very quickly. And since they still have midterms, even though it's a quarter system, you basically have exams after 2 or 3 weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks into the quarter, you already have some tests that you need to pass usually. So really, it's important to pay attention and go work however you want some people to work on. It's important to not leave things hanging and really start working quickly. I did like the quarter system though, because it gave like more flexibility in terms of class. You can pick basically more class overall, I felt, and so you can really, if you don't like a class, it's not going to last 6 months of a class you don't like, and you can. And usually classes are built as A, B, C, and so you can just continue taking a class if you like it and just swap to another class if you realize that the part A of a class was not for you.
I just also want to add to keep in mind that while you're taking midterms and writing your papers, your students are also taking their midterms and exams. So just keep that in mind too, with grading and with TAing and teaching. You really have to hit the ground running. And especially for fall quarter or even winter quarter, expect a lot of students to be in your office hours asking for help because they're also trying to figure out the quarter system.
Thank you, everyone. So there are some questions here about housing, and I would just like to say some of these are probably more should be directed towards the staff in housing. I really want to hear from our current students and have them share their stories. So if you have some questions about getting a spot from the waitlist or applying for housing, that's probably something that should be directed directly to housing. But for our students, there is someone who's asking about which housing options on campus would you recommend? So if there are specific places on campus that you might recommend, maybe you would like to share that with our participants.
I feel like there's not really a bad choice. I feel like all the housing has its own benefits, and I think you kind of need to pick it yourself. I lived in, it's one of the mesas, it's south or central, so the older mesas. And I liked the apartments because they were a little bigger than the Mesa Nuevas, but they were older. So yeah, the feel of the building was a bit older, while the other ones are newer. I think the newer ones also have dishwashers. So there's all these little differences between all the housing, but I don't think any of them are really bad. Coast is on the beach, kind of, which is really nice. So it just depends on what you want. I don't know if this is very useful, but if you have a more specific question, I can answer that.
There are a few questions as well about transportation. So mode of transportation that you prefer, if people usually walk or if they bike. Is San Diego La Jolla cycling friendly, or is it recommended one by a car? So can anybody talk about commuting or getting around La Jolla or San Diego?
So if you live on campus or close to campus, it's definitely doable to, like on campus, you can walk to campus easily. There's also a lot of shuttles that come from all of the on-campus housing to the campus. If you live close to campus, not on-campus housing, I know that there's a few apartment buildings that have also shuttles from their apartment to the campus. And there's also quite a lot of buses that all go to campus. If you start living further from campus, I would recommend either getting a car, but then you have to take into account the price of parking, or trying to live not too far from one of the bus lines. For example, in my house, we live about 10 minutes, a 10-minute walk from the bus, and then it's 20 minutes to campus, so it's a 30-minute commute, not too bad. If you start living further away, I would definitely recommend driving, but then traffic can really suck in the morning. And concerning biking, San Diego is pretty hilly, so if you're very good at biking and are not afraid of cars, because San Diego also has a lot of cars, then you can do it. I have some friends that bike from Hillcrest to campus in the morning, which is pretty insane. It's like an hour bike, but they definitely can do it. And I don't remember what else was in the question, but transportation, the bus, you get a bus pass for free with from UCSD, so taking the bus is free, so you don't have to account for it in your budget. I think that's it.
Thanks, everyone. So kind of still along the housing question, there is a question that says, if I am not able to get on-campus housing, are there any neighborhoods around the city that you would recommend, considering price and distance?
So off campus, there is around campus, there's quite a lot of apartment communities that have openings fairly frequently. They can be kind of expensive, some of them, because landlords know that a lot of students want to get on campus. And it's also La Jolla, so it's an expensive neighborhood. But sometimes you can find hidden gems there. Or if you're willing to live with more people, you usually can lower the price that way. If you decide to go if you're comfortable with a little bit longer commute, so 30 to 40-minute commute, then I would recommend trying to go more towards either La Jolla, but again, so closer to the beach. There's like the 41 or 30 bus, I think, that goes all the way down to Pacific Beach. And if you try to find any housing on that kind of line, then you can Those are some pretty nice neighborhoods. They have a lot more shops and they're closer to the beach. The commute will be longer. Or right now, I think I live in Claremont or University Heights, I always forget. But it's along the bus 41 line. You can find some houses, and then if you share it with multiple people, it again brings the price down. So that can be nice also. You're a bit further from campus. It's kind of suburban, but for example, you can get a house with a small garden or with like if you're like a pretty big living room, and you have more options.
I think a lot of people also live in Hillcrest and North Park, which is further away from the beach, so it's cheaper and it's like a fun neighborhood too. So
yeah, Hillcrest and North Park are kind of the hipster neighborhood. So they're nice. They have a lot of bars and cafes. They're just then you're looking more at an hour commute than 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, and if there are international students, when I came in, I wasn't comfortable driving in the US. I did not have a car. So that was a massive concern. So a lot of these neighborhoods, which are outside of the bus, which are outside of the scope of the bus, then it gets a little tricky. So just be careful about that.
There is a campus shuttle that goes down to Hillcrest. So if you kind of make sure you live around there, then you can take the Hillcrest shuttle.
There's a question here that says, can you tell us about the Alumni Network strength at UCSD? A good alumni network can be very useful in establishing careers for current students. Do any of you have experience or have you met alums from your programs?
I haven't really started looking for a job yet. I still got two years of PhD, but I know we get quite a lot of emails about alums. So I'm guessing I have no idea. I wouldn't be able to answer that question, but there seems to be a lot of alumni activity just based on the emails I'm getting.
There's actually a GSA career night tonight, and we're inviting a few alumni to come and speak. So just we usually do that like once a quarter, I would say, and we have a lot of like speakers that outside of that through the Career Center, where UCSD alumni come in. Personally, I haven't met an alumni from my program, but my program is very small. But I have. My brother has had a completely different experience. He went to Rady, he did a master's of finance, and through the Alumni Network, he was able to get a financial analyst job at a local company. So people have different experiences. My department is very small, so I haven't met anyone from my department yet.
There's another question if anyone wants to talk about this, and it says, how much do you spend for food daily?
It varies on how much you're willing to cook. A meal typically will cost, a meal outside, if you buy a whole meal, will cost in the neighborhood of $10. It'll be anything between $8 to $12. I've been vegan for a while, so I don't easily, and I don't find the value in spending $10 for every meal when I eat outside. So I prefer to cook. And my grocery budget for the whole month is maybe around $250. And maybe 4 or 5 hours of cooking every week. So it's both. So $250 and maybe 30 to 40 hours a month on cooking.
Sort of on the question of housing and just neighborhoods we've been talking about, the student wants to know, how safe is the campus's surrounding area? Are there any sort of no-go unsafe neighborhoods or anything like that? What's your experience been around campus?
As far as I know, it's pretty safe around La Jolla especially. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything to say.
Yeah, I've never really heard of any neighborhoods. I don't know, never heard of any no-go neighborhoods, especially as Yana said, around La Jolla, it's usually pretty safe. And even, I mean, yeah, I've never had someone told me of a neighborhood I shouldn't go to in San Diego, so I wouldn't even be able to name it. One neighborhood that I would not recommend going to.
There are also quite a few questions about working on campus, so other job opportunities and such. I did want to let everybody know we are having a webinar coming up soon about graduate student funding and what your options are as a graduate student. So stay tuned for that. That will be posted soon. But I did want to just pose the question to the group. Someone's asking, what are the options for on-campus jobs other than TA-ships? Would you recommend taking one?
Very interesting. I don't think any of the other jobs other than TA and RA give you a discount on your tuition. So I would definitely recommend a TA-ship or an RA-ship. I don't even think if you're a PhD student, your professor would allow you to take in, because they have to pay your tuition if they're paying you, at least in ECE. I don't think my professor would allow me to take a job outside of an RA or a TA, because then he would have to pay more for me. So I think it really depends, but usually from my experience and from people I know the experience, you want to stick with TA or RA because they are the one that give you discount on your tuition. And
yeah, to add to that, in my department, I've done, especially in the first year, I've done a number of reader jobs. So that is when you don't teach, you're not a teaching assistant, you're only helping the professor grade assignments and papers. The pay is considerably less. I would get about $1,200 a month as opposed to $2,400 a month that I get as a TA. But the work is definitely lesser. And it does pay your tuition. So if you're hired as a reader for a course, then your tuition is still reimbursed. So a reader, a teaching assistant, or a research assistant where the professor is willing to pay your fees are the three modes of funding mechanisms through which you can get your tuition reimbursed. If you just want to make some more money and you can pay the tuition by yourself, then there are multiple job options. It's just that you see what you like.
And actually, related to that question, someone's asking, can a master's student or any student do an RA-ship that's outside of their department? Can it be in other departments on campus?
As far as I know, the RA-ships are controlled by the professors and their funding sources. So if a professor is willing to hire you, I don't see why you cannot do it. You just have to find a professor who's willing to hire you, pay that money and reimburse your tuition, and then you're fine.
We're getting a few questions, obviously related to the situation with COVID-19 and how it's changed things, particularly, of course, for this spring term. There are a lot of questions we don't know answers to yet. The university is still formulating a plan for fall. So just to all of our students out there, do know that once we have more information, we will communicate that to you. But just for your perspective as current students who are, of course, here going through this, having to move to remote learning, remote teaching in some cases, can you talk a little bit about what kind of your day-to-day is like now that you've moved to online instruction? What are your lives like at UCSD for this term?
I have moved to online teaching, which is very different, of course, but everyone's really trying their best to adjust. And the school, or like the GSA, is also hosting like the career night that's happening tonight is online, so there is stuff to do, so the community is still there. It's just a little bit harder, but I think that's kind of the same everywhere. And then in terms of day-to-day life, I guess I do a lot of reading. I'm post-candidacy, so I don't have any classes anymore, so I think because I'm not taking any classes online myself, that there isn't that much of a change in that respect, but teaching online is pretty hard.
I am doing research online, and since most of my research is, well, at least, yeah, big part of my research is done just sitting behind a computer and doing simulations. I'm fine with doing it at home. I will actually have to go back to campus soon in the next month to start doing some more experiments. And I know there is a system in place with some labs where if you have to there is basically some labs have put in some kind of rotation where you can have 2 people in a lab at a time and you rotate throughout the week who can be there, who cannot be there. And so that's how lab research has been going on, at least recently, I think. And but I'm not too familiar with that because I haven't had to go to the lab yet. But it seems like it's basically limited number of people per room, and you rotate throughout the week.
I'm still in my second year of the PhD, so it's basically like a second year of a master's degree. So I'm still doing a full course load. And in that sense, there hasn't been much of a change in my life per se. It's just that I'm doing everything from my bedroom instead of actually going to the university. Things have gotten a little busier though, because there is this perception that, oh, because we're not traveling, we're just sitting in our rooms, we have more time. So people place more demands on your time that way. But otherwise, if you're doing classes, I don't see, other than your social situation, I don't see how your academic and classroom situation can change drastically because of a move to online.
There's a question kind of related a little to courses that says, are we allowed to audit courses? Have any of you audited a course before? Do you have any experience with that?
Sorry, Celine. I've audited some courses before. There's usually no problem. Just go to the professor during the first class and ask them if you can audit. I mean, you even don't always have to do that. They're grad classes, so they usually don't take attendance and they don't really care who's there, who's not there. But you can definitely audit classes from from the few classes I've audited. They usually just ask you to not come the day of the midterm and the day of the final, and then the rest of the time you can just access the information like everyone else.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I audited a class so I can get to know the professor better. She was outside of my department, so I highly recommend you can just walk in. If you want to, you can email the professor beforehand.
I will say that some of my friends have tried to audit classes and have not been very successful, and that's because some courses are extremely in demand, and a lot of undergraduates need them to finish their required coursework. So very often, and there's a long wait list going for some of these classes. So if that is not a required class for you and you're not from that department, often they will ask you to not take that course or not let you take that course. But outside of those particular circumstances, there are several courses which are not fully enrolled and in a wide variety of departments and different kinds of, I've had people take like acting classes and singing and music. And those you are more than welcome to take, as long as those are not already full and people who need to take them have the space to take it.
We have a question here about whether the GSA has any workshops or programs for international students to improve their English ability, their oral or writing skills. If not the GSA, if you could maybe comment on any other resources at the university that you're aware of. And
the GSA does not do this, but I'm under the impression that the university does something like this. So there are definitely programs for students to improve on English once they come here. And I think ISPO also coordinates some English-speaking, I don't know, Gabby, you might know more about this. I've considered volunteering for it at different points of time. So this is where they bring a local speaker in, and then you have a group of students who are working on their spoken English, and it's just like a conversation table. So there are multiple informal opportunities for you.
So I know that for TAing, there is at least in my department, I don't know if it's across department, you have a certain TOEFL score that you need to have obtained in the speaking section. And if you don't have that score, you can take a class that lasts a quarter. I think it's 3 hours a week. A guy in my lab took it. It seemed like a good class to just improve your English. And then once you pass that class, they give you a certificate that you can teach in English. So I know that is one of the places you can improve your English.
The Writing Hub has usually they focus more on like content stuff, but they do have these workshop groups that are for EFL learners to help them with their writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to say exactly. The Writing Hub, which is housed, it's within the Teaching and Learning Commons, which is a really, really great division at UC San Diego. They're actually based within the Geisel Library that you can see here on the slide. They have a variety of different programs for tutoring, for both learning rather in the classroom and teaching as well. And exactly as everyone has talked about, they offer a variety of resources and tools, both online and in person, to assist with presentation skills, with improving oral fluency and such. And as Sushil was saying, in more of an informal setting, the International Students and Programs Office runs what's called an English in Action conversation program. This has been running for, I think about 25 years now, but it pairs a non-native English speaker at UC San Diego with a native English speaker. So that could be another student, it could be a staff member, community member, just to meet maybe once a week, every other week, to have conversations. So it's not a formal, no formal lessons or anything, but it's a great way to just get more comfortable in your English speaking skills. And that's, again, offered through the International Students and Programs Office. So if you just go to iprograms.ucsd.edu, you can learn more about it now. It is on hiatus for spring, but it is scheduled to start up again for the fall.
Can anyone speak about being a TA outside of their department?
Yes, I'm a TA for the writing programs. So the university is divided up into colleges for the undergrads, and each college has their own writing program. And those programs are often looking for TAs from all kinds of departments. I'm from visual arts, but a lot of people in my writing program are from history. We even had someone from bioengineering. And those programs will give you a 50% year-long contract, which is very nice because it's you know it's going to be there. So yeah.
And we have a question here as well, just kind of pivoting a little bit, talking about orientation programs for the fall. Are graduate students going to get to interact with professors from their department? Will GSA representatives from that particular department organize such orientations? I do want to just quickly plug and say that the International Students and Programs Office, Graduate Division, and different departments were all working really hard on putting together a robust orientation program for all students. So absolutely, you'll be still getting the same level of orientation that you would get, even if you were here in person. So I just wanted to let everybody know that, but maybe if the group wants to talk a little bit, is GSA representing representatives, are they going to be organizing anything or any programs on that side?
Sorry, I was saying this muted. Gabby, can you quickly repeat the question?
Sure. So the students wanting to know, are there any, is the GSA going to be, or the GSA representative from any particular department, are they going to be organizing orientations? Or are they going to be organizing any social programs or activities online for students joining in the fall?
Yes, we don't know what those will be, but yes. And we will try to get the information to everybody as effectively as possible as soon as we know what we're going to do.
So we're coming up, we only have about a minute or so left, so I want to make sure we're getting to as many questions as possible. So we might take just about one or two more. We did have a question I wanted to address because we were talking a lot about employment or working on campus as part of your funding package. We did have a student ask, as an international student, is it easy to get a job off campus? For example, doing work at a local cafe as a waiter or waitress. And I just wanted to let our students know, our international students, that there are certain rules you have to be aware of as an international student in terms of work authorization. We are going to be hosting another webinar about employment in the United States and things you need to be aware of. But the biggest thing is, if you want to get a job off campus, the rule to remember is that that work has to be related to your field of study. So work at a cafe or something like that off campus would generally not be permitted. But again, we're going to get into more detail with this in our employment session that'll be coming up soon. So be sure to stay tuned for that, or visit our website at iemployment.ucsd.edu, which goes over all the rules for F1 students as well as J1 students about how to stay in status with your employment. Let's see here, maybe time for one more question.
I would also like to mention there are some questions here about transcripts. So I would just like to put in another plug for the email address gradadmissions@ucsd.edu, and that Sally and her team is available to answer those questions about transcripts and pending documents if you have any questions.
Great. And just a final reminder too, we're getting a couple of questions asking if this session was recorded. Yes, this whole session was recorded, and we will be posting it usually within about a week or so on our website at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. So you're welcome to come back and view it at any point. But I think we need to wrap it up now. We've gotten to 1 hour. I want to thank our students very much for their time this morning, providing these valuable answers, information to our new students. Hopefully it was helpful to all of you. We look forward to welcoming you this fall. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact us at any point. We'll be happy to answer your questions. Other than that, have a good day or evening wherever you might be, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, everybody.